Burnout. Everyone has heard of it. Is this something you're going through? How do you identify this with your own teams, within yourself? On this episode on All Things Locs, we're going to be uncovering different tactics on how to prevent this within yourself and with your team. Stay tuned. Let's rock and roll. So Dan, let's just get on the same page. When we talk about burnout, what do you mean by burnout?
I mean, easy definition is just a combination of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by just, any individual's version of just prolonged stress, right? So there is a difference between being tired, which I think, pretty much all of us could, have a moment in time where we're just really exhausted and tired. But then there's just that constant, no matter what you do, no matter how much sleep you get, no matter how much meditation or coffee you pound down, you just feel like you're running on E all the time. And that's what we're looking at to help really identify what the symptoms really look like, and then understanding what is really causing that level of exhaustion.
Yes.
Right? Because again, it's not just a matter of, hey, I'm working real hard and I'm putting in my 40 hours or 50 or 60 or 70, 80, depending if you're running an organization. It really comes down to what's happening in work as well as really what's happening outside of work, right? And what I mean by that is, are you able to disconnect from work, go home, and not be on your phone, not be on your work emails? You're not answering phone calls at 9 o'clock at night, or you're not the person sending out emails at 9 o'clock at night. So when we talk about having some kind of boundary, it's just really being able to pull yourself away from work and have a little bit of downtime and some me time.
So so for you, you've had a lot of patients before too, and like there is a significant difference of like, okay, they're just tired versus this person is experiencing some burnout. Like maybe they don't get that's what it is. What are some questions that you ask them to really pull that difference of they're tired, they need this, versus they are going through exactly that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just, again, it's not a matter of, hey, I just feel exhausted. But it's really also coming down to, do you feel like you have enough support? Do you feel valued? And that is what you see a lot in organizations where everybody's working hard. But the organizations that are able to thrive, even while maybe grinding or just putting in a lot of work, they do well because they have a certain level of appreciation and gratitude that comes their way. So there's a big difference between the culture that they're working in compared to the organizations where a lot of employees and maybe even the owner are saying, I'm burned out. So that's really an important one. And that's why it's not just a matter of I feel really tired and work to the bone. It's just I'm doing all this work, and then it's almost as if you guys don't even give a shit about me and you're not even recognizing me. So what is the point of me doing what I'm doing?
So that's so good. There's an area of this that I heard, I think it was Uncle Grant Cardone talk about this. So when you said, when we're defining burnout, emotional, physical, mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. I don't think a lot of people are afraid of work, that they're willing to put the pedal to the metal. But when there is no clear end in sight and you're just doing this continuously without like, is this another month, another day, another like a year? And that's what really compounds the burnout. So I know Cardone was talking about that, and I felt that was a big one. So when we look at some of the key contributors, when you're saying like lack of boundaries, unrealistic workload or timelines, feeling unsupported, feeling even undervalued, is like there's a lot of variables here that are not being accounted to, that then it's that kind of mental side of things of like, I don't know when this is going to end.
Yeah. That's a really fair point. And then on top of that, you, in certain individuals, can compound that with this concept of just everything needs to be perfect. And, and I obviously, and I love Tony Robbins for saying this, that perfection is the worst standard possible because it's unattainable. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're basically almost guaranteeing to set yourself up to feel like crap all the time because you have a standard that can never be met. Which I know for some people they say, yeah, but isn't perfection like, it's good to have that mentality. It's really a matter of striving to be perfect, knowing that you'll never actually attain it. But some people it's just, I got to be 100%, I got to be 100%. And they add a lot of undue stress and pressure to them that it's just not, it's not necessary.
Let me push back on that just a little bit. So especially in the world of like healthcare, where if something is not perfect from even operational perspective, paperwork, people can get really hurt. medical malpractice.
Correct.
There's a lot of stuff there. So especially in an industry where if you're not perfect, that could be someone's life on the line. They could have irreversible damage. What do you say to that of making sure that we are adhering to the right rules and protocols for safety?
Yeah.
But then also the other side of it too.
No, so that's a good point. It's like, I don't need to be perfect in this surgery.
Yeah, it's like,
it's like
I'm getting another surgeon,
like I can
bro.
leave something inside of you. It's okay. No, I mean, it's really understanding, to your point, when do I need to be perfect, right? And like, where do I need to actually strive to be 100% versus, well, if it's just every aspect of my life and every aspect of my business, that's the stuff that just gets overwhelming because it's, all right, every little thing, like you didn't fold the clothes the correct way. You didn't do this the right way. You didn't open the facility the correct way. You missed this, it's like, you start becoming very over the top and becoming a micromanager of just yourself, your life, and everybody else's life around you. And that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. It's not a matter of not having that perfection mindset with certain tasks that you're doing, especially if it's impacting another person's life. It's just understanding, all right, when do I not need to be perfect, knowing that we're human beings, we're not machines, and we will mess up time to time on some like basic shit that honestly doesn't really matter all that much in the grand scheme.
You know what's something that's fascinating too is that I feel like there's some folks that have just a great poker face. You have some, it's one thing when you're going through burnout and you feel it, but it's not always something that you want to maybe display. You know, especially in a work environment where you're like, oh, I'm so tired, or oh, they're complaining, or I'm here again. But how do you go about recognizing it with like with an employee versus a company or business owner when you're working with them? How do you recognize it with them versus like maybe an employee?
Yeah. So obviously you do have those individuals that make
over
it
the top.
Yeah, no shit. Right? Like, I'm so busy. I have all these meetings. I'm just
Belinda, shut up.
Yeah.
We get it.
I mean, even owners sometimes are like, I have so much to do. And it's like, dude, nobody gives you shit. Like, you own the place, you make the most money. We don't care that you're working that much. But when you're looking at it from the standpoint of, all right, how do I identify that in an employee? Like, how do I know? I think the easy thing, because again, you can't really always see who's really maybe fatigued, but really have to look at behaviors that have changed, right? So if that person who used to come in early, and I'm not talking like an hour early, it's just 15, 20 minutes early to prep for the day. Now they're showing up 5 minutes beforehand. Or if you're seeing a massive drop in their productivity, that's what, those are the two big telltale signs. It's like, is their productivity going down? And then are the behaviors that they had that were good, are they now actually starting to regress and get a little worse?
Mm-hmm.
Did they have a period in the career where they went above and beyond and now they're not? It's just the things that we kind of take for granted. They're not going to come out and just say, hey, by the way, boss, like, I'm feeling like shit. You treat me like garbage. I think I'm going to check out in a week. It's like they start dropping hints. Mm-hmm. And these little hints are really important for organizations to pay attention to, not just for the good, obviously, of the person that is working with you, but obviously you have a product that you're delivering, or maybe you're helping patients or customers. They're being affected in a huge way. And then realistically down at the bottom, the bottom line is being affected, that your business is now suffering too, simply because you're not actually paying attention to those little behaviors that they're actually demonstrating to tell you, hey, I'm getting burned out here.
Well, I'll add a couple things to that, especially around like employees. So I look at response times. When you're talking to someone and they're sharp, every time you talk to them, they just respond quickly. Yep. And that's just like their norm. And when you talk to them again, and they're in the thick of it with burnout, you could just tell like it's been compounding, and it just takes them a little while to respond. They're like, because it affects how you think. It affects how quickly you can respond to something, because it takes you a little bit longer to work through your thoughts. So I've had clients where like I'm on a Zoom call with them, and you could just tell that by how slowly they're responding to just basic things where I'm thinking, okay, they're in the middle of it. Hey, let's pause for a second. What's going on with this? What's going on with that? And you're like, okay, we need to dive into strategies to get you up to center, to get grounded, and then attack it. Otherwise, we're pouring from an empty cup. Yeah,
that was actually gonna be my question for you, because it's very easy just to focus on employees. And that has been like, if you follow burnout patterns in the US, it's obviously understandably a ton of spotlight on employees, but owners get burned out too. Mm-hmm. And you've worked with a ton of owners. What are some of the things that you see from them that not only helps somebody like yourself, where if you're in a position of coaching them, but even from a standpoint of employees who really would be better served by trying to understand and support the people that they're working for. What kind of stuff do you see from owners that tell you, hey, I think they're getting really burned out, aside from like that slow down response time you were just talking about?
So slow down is a big one. So that's just an observable behavior. So when I'm talking to them and I'm like, okay, they're just slower. It's not really different than like an athlete where they start dropping like footballs, where they start missing passes with just little tiny things. So to me, that's a big one. That's observable behavior. Also with different like questions that I ask them, especially around like, what was your sleep like? What did you eat? Just little things like that might seem very elementary, of like, hey man, did you eat today? Or I'm looking at their desk and they have like 4 cracked open Red Bulls. And I'm like, okay, they're probably running on like 1,000, milligrams of caffeine right now. It's like, what did you eat? So I know that they're going through this just from like a physical perspective. So when I'm asking them questions and they're having a hard time kind of responding, I'm like, okay. And then from there, I ask, what's these past couple of days been looking like? Or has this past few weeks been looking like? It's like, well, I had this person left, or this person's sick, they got COVID, something else, and I've had to kind of pick up the mantle. Like, okay, what are you doing to offset that? What's your mental health survival toolkit look like? And most of them are like, what is that? What the hell is that? What does that even mean? It's like, okay, well, when people are going through their own burnout, what might work for me might be the worst thing for Dan. There are some folks that really love to just literally just being like in a spa, and I can't stand that. That would actually stress me out further. Like, we're going to have a spa day. I'm like, no, I'd rather not. So my mental health toolkit is that when you're going through burnout, you have to find ways to get yourself back. And so you want to look at things. What are the activities that you do that make you feel full? What are activities that you do that reinvigorate you? What are activities to do or things not to do to re-energize you? And because you essentially need to heal yourself to get back to that, right? So when you go through that process, you want to basically do even things around food, even things around meditation, things around prayer, being in nature, doing a hike, doing a workout. I have a client where they have 5 things on their mental health toolkit. Them specifically is what they'll do is that they'll get their assistant to stop meetings for the rest of the day when they're just out. They will send 5 voice messages to people he hasn't connected to in a while. So on your phone, he'll say something to this effect. So I'll be like, hey Dan, it's been a while. I was just thinking about you. I wanted to send you this voice message, send you some good energy. I hope you crush it, man. And I'll talk to you soon. If you need anything, give me a shout. He'll do that to 5 people. He'll have a gratitude journal, and then he'll do a hellacious leg workout and sauna. That is like this survival toolkit that helps him get back. He de-stresses himself. He sends out good energy. He writes it out, and that's what works for him. For somebody else, that doesn't work. It might be a spa day. It might be going out to dinner by yourself. Might be doing something else. So find out what those things are. And that's like your own specific strategy to help you start to attack burnout and get yourself back to baseline. Yeah.
So it's an important point you made too, which is, I'd like to meet any employee that loves working with a burned out owner. Like that, I don't know if that exists. It's like you look at an owner who's really just frazzled and their decision-making is maybe getting worse, or they don't even want to make it just because they don't even have the mental clarity to do it. And this is where, for you, people who are just in leadership positions, whether it's ownership or management, it's really important to understand that you let yourself get like shit. You can't help your employees the best you possibly can. And then honestly, for you employees out there, it's just to be, cognizant and aware. I still remember the one employee who sincerely asked me, like, how am I doing? When I was in that position of management. Like, I know it's fine, but she's like, you always check in on us. If I see you busting your ass, it's like, are you doing okay? And honestly, that, like, to this day, and I still talk to her here and there, that mattered so much to just know that somebody was actually thinking of me, even though I was totally fine. So even for you employees, just maybe check in with your supervisors once in a while. Maybe they're having a tough time too. But when we're looking at like ways to recharge, what are some things that we can do to maybe limit the damage, so to speak, of like, all right, I don't need to get my tank down to E before I decide to pay some attention to my body and my mind to get me back to full charge. What can they do before they get to that point?
So there's a few different things that you can do. One of them is have those moments of like self-reflection to figure out like, kind of what you mentioned with like the car. If you are driving and you never even look at your fuel tank, you're never really going to know until because your car, it could be running fine. Then all of a sudden it feels like it hits a wall. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever done this where you're actually driving and your car just literally runs out of gas. It's not this, it's very sudden. It starts to wind down. And that's what it feels like when you're really hitting that wall of burnout. So it's identifying when you're in your peak state and then identifying the signs within you when you're about to hit that E, where like you have nothing left, you're literally imploding, you're about to have a nervous breakdown, because that's actually what happens when things get really severe, is that. So kind of what you mentioned before is that when we can identify that with somebody, we're like, hey, they're a little slower here, they just seem stressed, eye bags, they're not feeling rested. It's like, well, when you are constantly looking at your goals, when you constantly have problems in front of you, when people are complaining every day, when you have emails, when you have meetings, what that does is it forces the person to take their point of attention off of them onto someplace else. The best place to start is having check-in points with you of like, how am I feeling here? Like, dude, because otherwise you're taking that point of attention out from the street and looking at that fuel gauge. But when you're on back to back, you don't really have time to do that. So it's almost because we're not thinking about it, we don't recognize it. And then once we have those moments, then it's like we're literally imploding.
Yeah.
So taking those moments to check in with yourself and then figure out like what you're needing. So if you're feeling really irritated, which could be a sign. If you're feeling just really fatigued or really, really sleepy, that could be a sign. If you feel like you're just not sharp, that's a sign. And that could be nutrition. It could be taking a power nap. It can be talking to a friend that really fires you up or having like a really funny friend that makes you laugh. It could be doing a gratitude journal. It could be doing those things, but you really need to get your mind off of the task and reroute that focus of attention over to you so that you're like, okay, now that I had a moment to myself, my back is killing me. I need to like stretch or something because it's just been nagging at me.
Yeah. So
as an example.
Yeah, no, I think that's really a great example of just really doing like almost like a self-audit. Is like just checking in with yourself. Yeah, checking in yourself every day. Of just like, all right, how am I feeling? How am I doing? You know, and really I think the other aspect to kind of, and I hate saying this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, piggyback on that is what are you doing every single day to help yourself recharge? And like you gave that example of that client who's maybe I'll go do a leg workout, which obviously you can't go hard as hell every single day. But you can certainly do a sauna every day.
Yeah, you'll be crippled in like 3 days. Yeah.
So what is it that you can do every single day that helps you recharge? You know, is it reading a book, meditating, gratitude journal, whatever it is? You made a good point of just finding what works for you, and not going on social media to see what somebody's 3-hour fucking morning routine looks like. Like I get in a cold plunge, then I do that, and it's like just you gotta do what works for you. And I find that that's where a lot of people get confused. Is they don't actually know what works for them. And I've made that mistake. Like I'll ask a coach, it's like, well, what do you do? He's like, dude, you gotta find your own thing. Like I could tell you what I do, but it's not gonna work for you. So I know we're all trying to get like not maybe shortcuts, but accelerate our progress, so to speak, and like get there a lot faster. So you just find the cheat code, but ultimately you gotta know what works for your brain, what works for your body.
Yeah. So I'll be a little vulnerable here on this one. So my wife and I are very kind of different on this front. So I tend to have a lot of internal chatter in my head. Like I'm just constantly thinking about things. So when I'm trying to identify something that works for me, because when you look at entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs are like high activity, high energy, or they're typically pretty analytical people. So think of it like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Elon Musks of the world, like those types. Versus like the Richard Bransons of the world and the Donald Trumps of the world, where they're more like action, like they're not hyper analytical, right? Those are the ones that take the majority of entrepreneurs, is like that personality type. High D's and I think C, is it? Yeah. So people are analytical, people are very drivers. So for me, what helps me is finding things that give me peace, that like it's almost like things that help me. If you're thinking this as from perspective of a computer, and there's a lot of tabs up that are running all kinds of different things in the background, those happen to be thoughts. And so identifying things that help you that bring you peace, help you kind of shut those things off. So you're just there. You're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about the future. That eats away at a ton of people. That's one. The second one is like my wife, like she's an energy person. Whether she is, she doesn't, I mean, this was like the most love. It's not like she has 1,000 tabs open like me. She probably has 2 or 3. She's very, very present. So people like that are typically energy people. Like, does this fire me up? Does this give me energy? Is this like a jolt of espresso to me? Or does this take from me? And so finding the things that fire you up, that energize you, or finding things that give you peace and solace. What those activities are is probably going to be the things that are going to be part of your mental health toolkit. So when things get rough, eliminating those thoughts or doing those activities that really quiet the mind, quiet the heart, and also energize the body. I would look at it from those perspectives.
Gotcha. Now I'm going to make like a tiny little shift, but within a business, because we've obviously spent a good amount of time on individuals, what you guys can do. Where does like systems and it's going to sound like we're kind of saying this, but how does systems and processes come into play with reducing or limiting burnout in an organization?
It's almost everything. I think everyone's been a part of a company where you're looking at the owner and you're looking at your colleagues and you're looking at the coworkers and you're like, why is it set up this way? It is such a pain in the ass. Everything is a bottleneck. It's so much harder than what it needs to be. Why don't we just do this? It's easier. It's quicker. It's easier. It's quicker. It's faster. There's more eyeballs on it. So it does a huge thing that when you streamline your process and you streamline a system, whether, I don't care if it's Burger King, or it doesn't matter what it is. When you make things simple and quick is where you can increase speed. And when you increase speed, because it is simple and quick, you have to think about things less. And so it's less taxing. You could be in a flow state. You're just reacting. It's a lot easier. And it obviously depends on the business. But when your systems and operations are streamlined and they're faster, it reduces those friction points. It's so much easier. It causes less stress because you're not going to complain about something. You're less frustrated about a thing. And it's typically when you're streamlining your operations, communication is a lot higher. You're able to see where things are falling through. So that's a huge one. If you're in a company and you're seeing these bottlenecks or these problems, I guarantee you're going to have people that are working around them that are probably frustrated. And if that's prolonged, that can also be a burnout.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Because we talk about burnout, and a lot goes into culture. Just all right, what's the culture of your company? But then people ignore what you just said. It's like, well, I want to take care of my employees the best, and then you say, well, how come you don't have any systems to make their job easier and reduce the repetitiveness that could just be maybe automated or systematized? So they don't see how that kind of goes hand in hand.
And another point on that is like, oh, this is how we've always done it. Oh, this is just what works. It's like, you've been doing a construction company. You're running this construction company the same way since the 80s. There's softwares, there's things that we can do that's way easier. There's AutoCAD, there's that we don't have to do drafting. It's faster, it's easier. So sometimes where an employee can identify that with an employer is when there is no kind of logical explanation. It's like, this is just how we've always done it. When there's clear opportunity and clear solutions to make things quicker, easier, and faster.
So let me ask you about something that I don't think we've actually brought it up, even though it's very pertinent to burnout, which is work-life balance. So
that's a hard one.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are around that, because I know how that gets thrown around a ton. And everybody's got their own interpretation of what it actually means. So I'm just curious to know what you think of when you hear that phrase.
So when I think of work-life balance, I don't actually think it's balanced, because individuals are just so different. Businesses are so different. When I look at work-life balance, I think the question is just what works for you. There are some people that work a ton and they have, kind of their extracurricular activities, they have their own family, and that actually just works for them. Others, it's flipped. So finding something that is inspiring to you, that you're working towards, that you're attacking your goals, that there's a level of stress there, but then also making sure that you are doing the other activities that recharge you. And that is not a 50-50 thing. It could be very different, but it just works for you, where you're constantly bringing your best out. If I were to play 82 basketball games right now, I would be sore. I would be destroyed. I'd probably be in a hospice.
Does anybody play 82 basketball games
anymore, right? I know. But there's a lot of NBA players where it's like, because that's what they do, then they have all these other things in place to make sure that they do recover, that they do sleep, that they are getting the right nutrition in place, that they are stretching, that they are doing, that they are checking with a therapist. They are checking with all these other things to make sure that they can actually do that. So if you're an entrepreneur and what are your 82 games, then what are the things you need to set up to make sure that you can fulfill on that? And whatever that is for you is your work-life balance. It is not a 50-50 thing. It certainly isn't for me. What works for me is not going to be working for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's a very fair point. It's just, if you think about it, it's, we, I think it was like 2 episodes ago, we talked about a wheel of life, right? About being focused on many different aspects of life. It's like, well, I want to be balanced in all of them. It's just, well, how could you when there's, 10 categories you're looking at? It's like, all right, I'm going to spend the same amount of time on my finances that I do on my health and the same amount of time on my family and social connections. It's like, that's impossible. So I find that there's this, the misconception is just that, to your point, it's like, well, everything, it has to be like this. And I think what it really speaks to is about being intentional with the time they do have. And I'm a real big believer in quality over quantity, because you can say, oh, I spend 5 hours a day with my significant other, but it's, they're in the other room, or you're sitting on opposite ends of the couch and you're just watching like Netflix for 4 hours, not even talking to each other. Well, you had the time, but it was shit time, versus I got 1 hour a night with my wife and it's connection time and it's deep emotional bonding. Like, that is definitely more important. So to your point about everybody have a different aspect of it, you see things online with Alex Hormozy, he's like working like how many hours and not spending any time with friends and family, and people bash him. He's like, that's my work-life balance. For me, it works. For you, don't do that. But it's just really understanding, what does it look like for me that's going to make my life actually matter.
Yeah. And just to take that a step further is like, that's where people fuck up. That's where people make that mistake, is where they are like, I'll do what you do. And it's like, you can't do what I do. You can't do it. You don't have it. You don't have the heart. You don't have the guts. You don't have the balls. You don't have the intellect. You do not have it. And you need to do you. And I feel like what that is kind of a lack of looking within of what works for you. And I think that's one of the scariest things that people do, is like figuring out who the hell you are and what are the things that you need to do to find the most elite version of you, and not care about what other people think. So we pointed out with Hormozy ultimately was saying like, I don't care. Like, I work like this. I see my family this often. This is what I do, and that works for me, and I don't care what you think. And that's where people fuck up, is like they're getting that advice from other people without looking in.
Yes.
And then also caring what other people think. If it works for you, it works for you. You got one life. If just run with that. If you feel great and that's just part of you, like, and you're not violating man's laws or God's laws or whatever your moral compass is, run with that. And I'm cool with that. That's where everyone is different. That's where us as like coaches, we have to identify that entrepreneur A and entrepreneur B and entrepreneur C are very different beasts, and they have to be handled differently. How you maintain a tiger and how you maintain a stallion are not the same way, but those fuckers work. They're dangerous in their own ways. So imagine if the stallion never knew he was a stallion and the tiger never knew he was a tiger, because he didn't looked in the mirror. That's the problem. So if people fucking fix that shit, maybe they'll get a little bit further along in life. So that's what they need.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that's a good segue into, we spoke at the beginning of the episode about just the benefit that employees get from gratitude and appreciation, and how that will offset, the hard work that they're putting in, where maybe some companies, the employees get frustrated and ultimately just get pissed and leave, versus the employees who say, I love working here, regardless of the work that we're doing. But where does resiliency and having like an adaptable kind of mindset come into play as it relates to overall just burnout and just being able to kind of deal with life and work on a day-to-day basis?
I think culture plays a big part of that. I also think the role of the employee. If I'm having if I'm talking to a tax team or an accounting team, their adaptability and roll with the punches is probably going to be a little bit different than maybe a sales team or a marketing team. So I think we need to appreciate kind of the role that we're talking about, because there's some that just by human nature, because of the role that they're playing in the company, they're probably not as flexible as others. So that's a big one. But I think in terms of being ahead of the burnout curve is also kind of appreciating the strengths of the employee, but then also what charges up the employee. So even things as simple as the 5 love languages, people think that that's a relationship with just husbands and wives. Actually, it works really, really well with business. Giving someone like a financial bonus works, where someone like they don't care, but they just want to be recognized. You mentioned actually a second ago that when you had that employee go over to you and say like, hey, are you doing okay? That kind of reciprocity of like, hey, you're always checking up on us, saying we're okay, I'm checking up with you. And that really impacted you to this day. So I think making sure that we're reciprocating things positively, I think that's just good energy. And I think that actually really reduces down burnout, because you're having those conversations around it versus it's something that we stumble upon because it's been ignored.
Yeah. So, and then to kind of add to that, the way I look at it too is also you have those employees where it just seems like, and honestly, like this really actually just speaks to people, owners and managers too. It's the tiniest little stress, and it's just they kind of crumble.
Yeah,
right. It's
those
like,
are fun to work with.
Yeah,
right?
and it's just like everything has to be, to your point, everything has to be just so right and perfect. And if anything deviates from that, it's like, oh shit, like all hell breaks loose. And it's really being able to then, when you're hiring employees, or maybe it's yourself and you're running a company or a practice, and you want to get yourself more resilient, where the smallest little things don't make you fall apart. Because then what happens when the big shit hits the fan, right? As if it's a new regulation gets passed or some drastic state law gets passed that is going to vastly affect your business. How do you keep it together where you're the leader and you're making sure everybody knows, hey, we'll be okay, even though shit kind of sucks right now. So when I look at it like a standpoint of, all right, we're not all resilient, like you said, and we're not all very flexible and adaptable. What do you do in that instance where maybe you're talking to me, I'm like, Antonio, like half of my employees, they don't have that kind of mindset. What the hell can I do?
I think a big part of it is just making sure that we are like positive, and also making sure that the right person is in. If you are looking around and your whole team is comprised of people that are just not made of that right stuff, then you have a couple options here. You just write it out, and those are the people that you attracted. Or you got to change yourself and fire those people and bring someone else in. It really, really depends. The team that got you here will not always get you there, right? And that, I think, is also as part of a business owner is like, all right, with the team that I have, are they going to take me to the next goal? And if it's not, then this is where you might have to just part ways as friends, part ways as a business owner. But I really do believe in the power of positivity. That's a big one, is that even if there's a problem, even if there's a challenge or there's a friction point, that if at the very least the business owner is encouraging and articulating the power of resilience, the power of adaptability, that we really like this, that this is a part of our business, that this is something that you prize, it's something that you value. When you do that within your own like family, your children adjust to that. When you do that with a business, people adjust to that. When you do this with a sports organization, people adjust to that. So make sure that you're making those declarations of like having that winning attitude, staying positive, that we win no matter what, that things change. We have to be resilient. There's a compliance issue. There's a new law that passed. There's fires that happen around our building, whatever, that we are made of the right stuff and we'll find a way to win. And just declaring that promotes that. I think that's a big one.
That's really good. It's definitely, that actually definitely speaks to culture, right? It's just the mindset that you guys have, what kind of mentality we're trying to promote. I find that a lot of people also, a lot of us are on edge, kind of trying to anticipate what's going to happen next when, I think the two things that you said that are kind of popped in my head when you're talking is being able to, not positivity in the sense of you gloss over stuff as it is, right?
Yeah,
and I know that's not, and I know that's not what you're saying. You have these people like, everything's great, building's on fire, but we're all good, don't worry. It's just being able to see things for the way they really are. You know, it's no worse, it's no better. You envision it to make it look better, but it's being honest with people and just say, here's where we're at right now, but this is what we're going to do going forward. So it's positivity in the sense of, all right, kind of sucked right now, but we're going to be okay. But
I think people like that. Have you worked with someone where like, you know, it feels like the sky's falling a little bit, but the leader they're grounded, they're down pat, like they're essentially modeling that resiliency,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, second point is just, do you want to lead in the way you want other people to act, right? So it's, hey, you guys are not very resilient and not very flexible, and anything happens, and then they see the owner running around like a chicken without their head. It's like, well,
What are we gonna?
yeah,
Everything's okay, guys.
and then it's like, why do my employees do that? It's like, gee, I don't know,
Yeah.
because
Why do
maybe
you sound like
do
Mark
it.
Wahlberg or something? Guys,
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, you got to lead by example, and to your point, you got to promote the culture that you want.
Absolutely.
So, you know, as we're kind of like getting into, the end of our episode here and some phenomenal points, I would say that honestly for me, really the big take home is, outside of doing check-ins daily, having some gratitude for yourself and for your team. I think, I shouldn't say I think, I know the one thing that's been a massive difference for myself is actually the daily actions that I'm taking day to day, you know, to prevent myself from getting overwhelmed, burned out, exhausted. You know, I love my time with my wife. I want to be present for her. I want to be honestly present for myself.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one that I'd love for you to expand on. Is like, there's that saying that athletes have championship winning routines. So what do you do, like kind of priming yourself into work mode and then decompressing after?
Yeah. So the morning routine has been, it's not anything that I've had for like years and years and years. That actually was a struggle for me. Going from where I had a structured office job to working from home, which I know has been a big cause of burnout for people. It's just like, I'm home all day, so that means I can work all day. That was actually really hard for me to establish that routine initially. But being able to start the day the right way, and then at nighttime, so there are specific things I do every single day, Monday to Friday. And then at night, same thing. I've added in things that help me decompress. And, you know, there are some non-negotiables that always happen. Working out a certain way, working out certain days, stretching in the morning. Those are just things that I will not let deviate no matter where I'm at, whether I'm on vacation, whether I'm on, traveling for work. Those are certain things that just will keep me grounded. But ultimately, the things that we do every single day is what helps you avoid really a lot of what you're going to experience. And it's not a matter of avoiding stress. And that's one thing I want people to understand. We all have stress. Mm-hmm. So it's not avoiding it, because you can't avoid it. It's how you deal with it, and understanding that you can leverage stress to actually help you. So having a morning and evening routine has been a massive help for me. And that's honestly, I would just tell everybody else out there too, is what are you going to put on your schedule every single day versus saying, I'm going to do this. Or like, we're coming up to January 1st, or we're already past January 1st, I should say. And people are maybe working out now, and it's, I'm going to get in shape. Well, if you're not scheduling it, you're not going. Just like if you want to start, cooking healthy, if you're not going to schedule it, you're not going to definitely do it. So you have to build the habits into your routine. And that's actually definitely what I've done.
So that's something that you mentioned too, is that you mentioned the word non-negotiable.
Yes.
Like it's a non-negotiable. So you place things on your calendar that when you look at them, it's like, this is a non-negotiable. Correct. I have to do that. I can't move it. I can't skip it. What's that kind of mentality like, of essentially almost being a slave to what you put yourself to on the calendar? Or is that a wrong perspective to look at?
No, I mean, it's not necessarily, I understand it's not a slave to it. It's like, oh, you can't deviate, but we're, as human beings, we all do better with structure. Let's just call it what it is. And it's just making sure you're drilling in the discipline. That's why, honestly, like if I'm on vacation for probably more than a week, I start getting like really, I'm like, I want to go back home, because I have missed that routine that I have that actually, it just fuels me in the right way. It fuels my brain. It fuels my body. And that's what it's all about, is how are you really feeding your body and brain in the right way that's going to help optimize you to be at your best. And that's what these routines are all about, is how to actually have the best Antonio or the best Dan, or if you're out there, the best version of you is what you're doing every single day. And that's why people, when, we spent the last few episodes talking about goals, that's why most people fucking fail at their goals, because they don't build out the habits in their daily life to actually hit the goals. So it is your routines, it is your rituals that you set up that actually get you to the point where you want to be.
100%. I want to close out with a couple of these stats here that are staggering. A survey from June 2023 found that 22% of U.S. employees rated their current level of burnout as high or very high. And we both know that when you're in that spot, you're about to essentially implode, like nervous breakdowns. It can get pretty ugly. Another study reported that 52% of workers feel burned out, marking a 9% increase from pre-COVID levels. So that's not good. That's not good at all. Another one here is from the American Psychological Association's 2021 Work and Wellbeing Survey, revealed that 79% of employees had experienced work-related stress in the month before the survey. Isn't that crazy?
So you're saying burnout's a real thing?
It's a real thing. We see this a lot. What is it? Over 75% in healthcare workers? It's
like 50 to 75%, depending upon the survey. And I think the moral of the stats, if you made it this far in the episode, if you still don't think burnout's a real thing, then I don't know what the hell to tell you. Science backs it up. And whether or not you're one of those owners who just thinks, employees are weak as shit nowadays, it's not a matter of what you think. It's a matter of what they feel. Mm-hmm. And the data that Antonio just laid out shows it. Half your employees feel like shit. So the real question is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So if you have 100 employees, anywhere between 50 of them to 75 of them are literally on the edge of just losing it.
Yeah.
So hopefully these strategies helped out, and take some action. Take care of yourself, take care of your employees, and we'll see you on the next episode of All Things Locs.
All right, welcome back to the follow-up, where we're going to hit on some actionable strategies for burnout, specifically to healthcare organizations. Now, in our episode that hopefully you just listened to, at the tail end of it, Antonio went over some stats, and I really want to start there first, which is understanding that about 48 to 58% of healthcare workers have noted that they experience burnout. And if you talk to nurses, it's going to be a lot higher. So this is a prevalent issue in healthcare that a lot of us are aware of, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it. We need to have some things that we can do every single day to actually give our employees some more support. Now, aside from what we talked about in the episode, where you check in with yourself as the owner or the manager, or you check in with employees, you show some gratitude, what can we specifically do? Because at the end of the day, healthcare reimbursements are going down, and we know that causes one thing to happen. You have to see more patients. And whether you're in a hospital or you're in a private practice that takes insurance, if you're not making more money, it's hard to give employees bonuses, increase their salary, bring on new equipment. So there is a lot of stress being placed on organizations simply due to what's going on with healthcare reimbursements and Medicare changes as well. So when we're looking at what's going to happen now, is that you have to see more patients, and this is what's causing a lot of doctors and medical providers to exit the profession, which then puts more strain on the providers that are staying. So now we're saying, what the hell can we actually do? And honestly, the two things that help the most would be what can be done from a standpoint of creating systems in your organization. And we touched on that in the episode, but it's really important to understand, what do we do over and over and over again that can be systematized or can be automatic, maybe using an AI or just maybe using a software instead of actually having a person do the same repetitive task over and over again. Now, you might say, yeah, that's fine for maybe front desk where they're checking patients in, and I used to have them actually call every single patient to confirm their appointment, but now I use an automated system. But what the hell can I do for my doctors and my medical providers? And honestly, I would say there's two things that are really important when we're looking at the medical provider aspect. And one is, what can you do to help reduce the amount of time they spend on notes? Now, thankfully, I'm not doing notes anymore, but when I was treating patients, I, like all of you out there, hated doing notes just as much as the next person. We all know that's the worst part of the job and is just soul sucking, but you have to do it or else you're not getting paid. So what kind of platform can you use to maybe act as almost a scribe? That's one thing you can definitely do. And then the second thing, this is what I've seen in a lot of practices, is that the schedule is just a friggin' mess. Here you have like a boatload of patients between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and then there's a nice 2 to 3 hour lull. And then it gets busy again at night. And then providers get frustrated because they can't give good care. And then your support staff is overwhelmed because they have so many people coming in wave after wave. And it's like going to a doctor and you say, we got 6 people scheduled at 9 o'clock. Why the hell would you do that? Now, I know if you're out there saying, hey man, I got to see all my patients, what else can I do? Right? It's being smart with your schedule and creating efficiencies. So if you have a 2 to 3 hour gap every single day that's pretty damn quiet, why wouldn't you move patients to that 2 to 3 hour gap? Because then all you're doing is reducing the strain on the clinic and the providers and the support staff, and you're actually able to give providers what they want to do, which is spend more time with patients. So when we're looking at how to optimize our day, figure out where you can create workflows, figure out where you can automate things, where you can have a scribe service potentially, and how to create better workflows with your schedule. These are things that honestly, if you do these every single day, the amount of stress or exhaustion or burnout amongst your employees will plummet. And what this will enable you to do is help them become more productive while also providing way better care. So I hope this helps. I'll see you guys next time.